The guards dragged two women into the wine cellar beneath the imperial palace. It was winter in the year 655, Chang'an, capital of Tang Dynasty China. The women had been empresses and consorts just days before. Now they were prisoners who had not eaten in a week, their hair matted, their silk robes replaced with rough prisoner garments. What happened next was recorded by court historians who were required to document everything, even events the dynasty would later try to suppress. The executioners forced both women to their knees. They produced cleavers that had been specifically forged for this purpose. Without ceremony, without ritual, without allowing either woman to speak, they severed Empress Wang's hands at the wrists, then her feet at the ankles, then Consort Xiao's hands, then her feet. The women were still alive. They were meant to be alive. That was the point. The executioners lifted their bleeding bodies and lowered them into two massive wine jars, ceramic vessels normally used to ferment alcohol. The jars were just large enough to contain a human torso with no limbs. The women's heads protruded from the openings, nothing else. Then the executioners sealed the jars with wax, leaving only the heads exposed. A servant was dispatched to inform the new empress that her orders had been carried out. The servant was told to use a specific phrase when delivering the news. The phrase was Renji, human pigs. The new empress who ordered this punishment was 27 years old. 14 years earlier, she had entered this same palace as a fifth-rank concubine, the lowest rank that still had access to the emperor's bed. She was not royal. She was not noble. She was the daughter of a timber merchant. Her name was Wu Zhao. Within 50 years, she would become the only woman in 4,000 years of Chinese history to rule as emperor in her own name. She would kill her own sister, her own niece, her own granddaughter, two of her own sons, dozens of ministers, and thousands of suspected enemies. She would create a secret police force that terrorized the empire. She would rewrite religious texts to justify female rule. She would move the capital of China to escape the ghosts she claimed were haunting her. And it all began with what she did to the two women in those wine jars. This is the story of Wu Zetian, the human pig punishment, and the 50-year reign of terror that followed. It contains more documented murders, betrayals, and acts of cruelty than any other imperial biography in Chinese history. The court historians who recorded it were required to tell the truth. Many of them died for what they wrote. If you are drawn to real history, the kind that reveals what human beings are capable of when they hold absolute power, subscribe now and hit the notification bell. Comment below telling me where in the world you are watching from. What you are about to hear has been verified by multiple independent sources, recorded by eyewitnesses, and preserved in documents that have survived for over 1,300 years. This is not legend. This is the documented record of the most ruthless woman who ever lived. Let us begin with how a timber merchant's daughter entered the imperial palace and started her climb over the bodies of everyone who stood in her way. Wu Zhao was born in 624 in the city of Wenshui, Shanxi province. Her father, Wu Shihuo, was a timber merchant who had made a critical decision years before her birth. He had financially supported Li Yuan's rebellion against the Sui dynasty. That decision changed everything for the Wu family. When Li Yuan succeeded and founded the Tang dynasty as Emperor Gaozu, he remembered the merchants who had funded his war. Wu Shihuo was elevated from timber merchant to government minister. The Wu family went from wealthy commoners to minor aristocracy in a single generation. But there was a problem. Wu Shihuo had sons from his first wife, and when he died in 635, those sons inherited everything. Wu Zhao's mother, Lady Yang, was the second wife. She and her daughters were pushed out of the family home by the stepbrothers, forced to survive on a small allowance. Wu Zhao was 11 years old. She would never forget this humiliation. She would never forgive her half-brothers for it. Decades later, when she held absolute power, she would have one brother exiled to a remote jungle where he died of disease. She would have another brother's son executed for a minor offense. The Wu family's male line would be systematically destroyed. But that revenge was far in the future. In 635, Wu Jiao was simply a girl from a once prominent family that had fallen on hard times. She had one asset. She was extraordinarily beautiful. Court records describe her as having a face like a full moon, eyes that commanded attention, and a presence that made people stop speaking when she entered a room. In 637, Emperor Taizong issued a call for beautiful young women to join his imperial harem. Wu Jiao's mother saw an opportunity. She submitted her daughter's name. Wu Zhao was 14 years old when she entered the Forbidden City. Emperor Taizong was one of the greatest rulers in Chinese history. He had helped his father seize the throne, and then forced his father to abdicate in his favor. He had killed 2 of his own brothers to secure his position. He was brilliant, ruthless, and surrounded by talented advisors who helped him build what historians call the Golden Age of the Tang Dynasty. He was also 40 years old when 14-year-old Wu Jiao arrived in his palace. The imperial harem operated on a strict hierarchy. At the top was the Empress, who managed the inner palace and was mother to the heir. Below her were 4 consorts of the first rank. Below them were 9 consorts of the second rank. Below them were 27 concubines of the third rank. Below them were 81 concubines of the fourth rank. Wu Jiao entered at the 5th rank, Karen, a rank so low it barely counted. There were hundreds of women at this level, women whose primary function was to be available if the emperor ever wanted variety. Most women at this rank never slept with the emperor at all. They spent their lives in the inner palace, aging in obscurity, waiting for a summons that never came. Wu Jiao refused to accept this fate. The historical record shows that she attracted Taizong's attention through intelligence rather than seduction. She was literate, educated, capable of discussing politics and history. Taizong found her interesting. He gave her the nickname Mei Niang, meaning beautiful lady. He kept her close. But he did not favor her romantically. In 12 years as his concubine, Wu Jiao never bore Taizong a child. This suggests he rarely or never called her to his bed. He valued her as a companion, not as a lover. This was a problem. In the imperial system, a concubine's power came from her children. A concubine who bore a son might see that son become emperor. She would then become Empress Dowager, one of the most powerful positions in the empire. A concubine with no children had no future. Wu Jiao was running out of time. And then something happened that changed everything. In 648, Taizong fell ill. He was 50 years old and had spent decades in military campaigns. His body was failing. The imperial doctors could not cure him. Wu Jiao was assigned to attend him during his illness. She spent months at the dying emperor's bedside, watching, listening, learning. She observed which ministers had power and which were merely decorative. She memorized the fault lines of court politics. She also encountered Crown Prince Liji, Taizong's 9th son, who visited his father regularly. Liji was 21 years old. He was gentle, indecisive, and completely unlike his father. Historians describe him as emotionally fragile, prone to headaches, and dominated by stronger personalities around him. He was also immediately infatuated with his father's concubine. The historical record is unclear on exactly what happened between Wu Jiao and Liji while Emperor Taizong lay dying in the next room. What is clear is that by the time Taizong died in 649, Wu Jiao and Liji had formed a connection that would reshape Chinese history. But first, Wu Jiao had to survive what came next. When an emperor died, his childless concubines were required to become Buddhist nuns. They would have their heads shaved, move to the Ganye temple, and spend the rest of their lives praying for the dead emperor's soul. They were forbidden from ever marrying. They were expected to fade into religious obscurity. Wu Zhao was 25 years old when she entered the Ganye temple. She had spent 12 years in the palace and had nothing to show for it. No children, no power, no future. Or so everyone thought. Li Ji became Emperor Gaozong in 649. He was immediately consumed by the demands of ruling a vast empire. His official empress was a woman named Wang, from a powerful aristocratic family. His favorite consort was a woman named Xiao, called the Pure Consort, who had already borne him a son. Empress Wang had a problem. She had not produced an heir. In the imperial system, this was potentially fatal. If Consort Xiao's son was named Crown Prince, Empress Wang would lose her position, her influence, possibly her life. Empress Wang needed an ally, someone who could distract the emperor from Consort Xiao, someone who could divide his attention and prevent any single rival from becoming too powerful. She thought of the former concubine who had been sent to the temple, the one the emperor had obviously been attracted to, the one who was beautiful, intelligent, and currently powerless. Empress Wang made the worst decision of her life. She arranged for Emperor Gaozong to visit the Ganye temple on the anniversary of his father's death. She ensured that Wu Zhao would be present. She expected the emperor to take Wu Zhao as a minor concubine, a distraction that Empress Wang could control. What happened instead was that Emperor Gaozong fell completely, obsessively in love. Within weeks, Wu Zhao was back in the palace. Within months, she was pregnant. Within 2 years, she had borne the emperor 2 sons. Empress Wang had invited a tiger into her home. The tiger was now circling. By 653, the palace had 3 major factions. Empress Wang led the first faction. She had the support of the old aristocratic families who had helped found the Tang dynasty. Her uncle was the chancellor. Her family had served the throne for generations. She was legitimate, proper, exactly what an empress should be. But she had no children. Consort Xiao led the second faction. She was beautiful, favored by the emperor, and had borne him a son named Li Suji. If that son became crown prince, Consort Xiao would be the mother of the next emperor. Wu Zhao led the third faction. She was a former nun, a former concubine of the previous emperor, a woman of common birth who had no business being in the palace at all. The aristocratic families despised her. The old ministers refused to acknowledge her. But she had 2 sons, and the emperor was obsessed with her. The 3 women circled each other for 2 years. Alliances formed and dissolved. Empress Wang tried to maintain her alliance with Wu Zhao against Consort Xiao. Consort Xiao tried to convince Empress Wang that Wu Zhao was the real threat. Wu Zhao played both sides against each other, while steadily increasing her influence over the emperor. The court historians documented their tactics in remarkable detail. Empress Wang spread rumors that Wu Zhao had seduced the previous emperor, making her relationship with Gaozong a form of incest. Wu Zhao responded by having her allies spread rumors that Empress Wang was practicing witchcraft, keeping voodoo dolls of her rivals in her chambers. Consort Xiao accused Wu Zhao of disrespecting the previous emperor by leaving the temple. Wu Zhao had her allies accuse Consort Xiao of poisoning Empress Wang's tea. The emperor, caught between 3 women who all wanted each other destroyed, did nothing. He was paralyzed by indecision. He loved Wu Zhao, but feared the political consequences of elevating her. He respected Empress Wang, but resented her coldness. He enjoyed Consort Xiao, but increasingly found her tedious. Wu Zhao realized that the stalemate would continue until something forced the emperor's hand. She needed an event so dramatic, so devastating, that the emperor would have no choice but to act. In the autumn of 654, she created that event. In 654, Wu Zhao gave birth to a daughter. This was her 4th child, with Emperor Gaozong. The birth was unremarkable. The baby was healthy. One afternoon, shortly after the birth, Empress Wang visited Wu Zhao's chambers to see the new baby. This was a routine courtesy visit, expected behavior between women of the inner palace. Empress Wang looked at the baby, offered conventional congratulations, and left. What happened next depends on which source you believe. According to the official Tang Dynasty history, compiled decades later, the following occurred. Shortly after Empress Wang left, Wu Zhao strangled her own infant daughter. She then covered the body with a blanket and waited. When Emperor Gaozong arrived to visit, Wu Zhao pulled back the blanket, appeared to discover the dead baby for the first time, and immediately accused Empress Wang of murder. The emperor was devastated. He had just lost a daughter. The mother of that daughter was screaming that the empress had killed her child. The empress had been the last person alone with the baby. Emperor Gaozong believed Wu Zhao. He wanted to believe her. The accusation gave him the excuse he had been looking for to remove an empress he had never loved and replace her with the woman he was obsessed with. Now here is where historians disagree. Some modern scholars argue that Wu Zhao did not kill her own daughter. They point out that the story appears in histories written after Wu Zhao's death by historians who had every reason to blacken her name. They suggest the baby may have died of natural causes, and Wu Zhao simply exploited the death for political purposes. Other scholars point to the pattern of Wu Zhao's later behavior. She demonstrably killed other family members throughout her reign. She had her own nephew executed. She had her own granddaughter killed. She ordered the deaths of 2 of her own sons. If she was willing to kill adult children for political advantage, why not an infant? The truth is unknowable. What is documented is the result. Emperor Gaozong began formal proceedings to remove Empress Wang from her position. The old ministers protested furiously. The chancellor, Empress Wang's uncle, argued that removing an empress from an established aristocratic family to elevate a commoner would destabilize the dynasty. Other ministers threatened to resign. The emperor hesitated. The opposition was stronger than he expected. Wu Zhao was not finished. Over the following months, Wu Zhao systematically destroyed the ministers who opposed her. She had spies throughout the palace. She knew which ministers were corrupt, which had enemies, which had secrets they needed kept. She fed this information to the emperor carefully, timing each revelation for maximum impact. The chancellor who opposed her was accused of plotting treason. The evidence was thin, but Wu Zhao's allies in the court made sure it reached the emperor when he was most susceptible to suggestion. The chancellor was exiled. A senior minister who had argued against Wu Zhao's elevation was accused of accepting bribes. He was demoted and sent to a provincial post. One by one, the opponents fell. Those who survived learned to stay silent. By October of 655, the opposition was broken. Emperor Gaozong issued the decree. Empress Wang was removed from her position. Consort Shao was removed from her position. Both were stripped of their titles, their property, their servants, their names. They were designated commoners and imprisoned in a remote section of the palace. Wu Zhao became Empress of China. She was 31 years old. She had risen from timber merchant's daughter to 5th-rank concubine, to disgraced nun, to most powerful woman in the empire. It had taken her 18 years. But she was not satisfied. Empress Wang and Consort Shao were still alive. They were imprisoned, powerless, forgotten by everyone except Wu Zhao. They posed no political threat. Wu Zhao had them killed anyway. Not quickly, not cleanly, not mercifully. She invented a method specifically for them, a method that would ensure maximum suffering over maximum time, a method that would demonstrate to everyone in the palace what happened to those who opposed her. She called it the human pig. The punishment was carried out in the winter of 655, weeks after Wu Zhao's elevation to empress. Empress Wang and Consort Shao were brought from their prison cells to a wine cellar beneath the palace. They had been kept in isolation, fed minimal rations, denied any contact with the outside world. They did not know what was about to happen. The executioners severed their hands and feet while they were fully conscious. No anesthesia existed in 7th century China. The women experienced every moment of the amputation. The wounds were cauterized with hot irons to prevent them from bleeding to death. The executioners had been given specific instructions. The women were to survive as long as possible. They were placed in wine jars with their heads protruding from the top. The jars were then filled with alcohol. The official explanation was that the wine would preserve them. The actual effect was that alcohol continuously entered their wounds, causing pain that would not diminish with time. The jars were sealed. The women could not move. They could not escape. They could only wait. Wu Zhao visited them personally. The historical record preserves what happened during that visit. Wu Zhao stood before the 2 jars and looked at the women who had once been her rivals. Empress Wang, who had brought her back from the temple, who had thought she could be controlled, Consort Xiao, who had borne the emperor a son, who had thought her position was secure. Wu Zhao asked if they had anything to say. Consort Xiao spoke. Her words were recorded by the court historians, who were required to document even this. Wu Zhao, you treacherous witch. The emperor was foolish to fall for your schemes. I hope that in the next life I will be reborn as a cat, and you as a rat, and I will tear out your throat for eternity. Empress Wang remained silent. Wu Zhao turned and left the cellar. She gave orders that the women were to be kept alive as long as possible. Guards were stationed to ensure no one gave them food, water, or mercy. Empress Wang died first. The historical record does not specify how many days she survived. Estimates range from 3 days to 2 weeks. Consort Xiao lived longer. Her curse gave her something to hold on to. She lasted approximately 10 days before her body finally surrendered. When both women were confirmed dead, Wu Zhao had their bodies removed from the jars and disposed of without burial. In Chinese culture, denial of burial was the ultimate insult. It meant the souls could never rest, never move on to the afterlife, never find peace. Then Wu Zhao did something that revealed how deeply Consort Xiao's curse had affected her. She banned cats from the imperial palace. For the next 50 years of Wu Zhao's reign, no cat was permitted inside the Forbidden City. The ban was absolute. Any cat discovered inside the palace walls was killed immediately. Servants who failed to prevent cats from entering were punished severely. The official explanation was that cats were unclean animals. The actual reason was obvious to everyone at court. Wu Zhao was afraid of Consort Xiao's curse. The fear went deeper than superstition. Wu Zhao began experiencing what she described to her doctors as visitations. She claimed that the spirits of Empress Wang and Consort Xiao appeared in her chambers at night. She claimed they accused her, clawed at her, tried to drag her down to hell. The court physicians prescribed medicines for what they delicately called nervous exhaustion. The medicines did not help. Wu Zhao tried moving to different chambers in the palace. The ghosts followed. She tried having Buddhist monks perform exorcisms. The ghosts remained. Finally, she made a drastic decision. In 657, Wu Zhao convinced Emperor Gaozong to move the imperial capital from Chang'an to Luoyang, 500 miles to the east. The official justification was that Luoyang was more centrally located for governing the empire. The actual reason was that Wu Zhao wanted to escape the palace where she had committed the murders. The entire imperial government relocated. Thousands of officials, servants, guards, and family members packed up and moved to a new city because Wu Zhao could not sleep in the old one. It did not help. The ghosts, or Wu Zhao's guilt, or whatever was haunting her, followed her to Luoyang. She would be haunted for the rest of her life. But the haunting did not stop her from killing again. It did not make her merciful. It did not soften her reign. If anything, Wu Zhao became more ruthless as the years passed, as if she was trying to outrun her own conscience by accumulating more power than any conscience could touch. Emperor Gaozong had always been sickly. The headaches that plagued him as a young man grew worse as he aged. By the 660s, he was frequently incapacitated, unable to attend court, unable to make decisions. Wu Zhao stepped into the vacuum. At first, she acted as intermediary, conveying the emperor's decisions to the ministers. Then she began making minor decisions herself, decisions the emperor was too ill to review. Then she began making major decisions, stamping them with the imperial seal while her husband lay in his darkened chambers. The ministers noticed. They protested. Some of them tried to convince Emperor Gaozong to curtail his wife's growing power. Those ministers disappeared. Chancellor Sheng Guanyi submitted a memorial to the emperor in 664, requesting that Wu Zhao be removed from power. He argued that having a woman make imperial decisions violated tradition, natural order, and basic principles of government. Wu Zhao's spies intercepted the memorial before it reached the emperor. They brought it to her first. She confronted her husband with tears streaming down her face. She had sacrificed everything for him, she said. She had borne him children, managed his palace, nursed him through illness. And now his ministers wanted to throw her away like garbage? Emperor Gaozong, weak and manipulated, summoned Chancellor Sheng Guanyi and demanded an explanation. The chancellor tried to defend himself. He was arrested before he finished speaking. Within days, he was accused of treason. He was executed along with his son. His granddaughter was enslaved in the palace laundry. That granddaughter, Shangguan Waner, would grow up to become one of Wu Zhao's most trusted advisors. Wu Zhao collected the children of her enemies, raised them in the palace, and molded them into instruments of her will. She enjoyed the irony. After the Shangguan Yi incident, no minister dared challenge Wu Zhao openly. She was Empress in name, an emperor, in fact. Her husband, increasingly ill and increasingly irrelevant, retreated into his chambers and let his wife rule. In 683, Emperor Gaozong died. Wu Zhao was 59 years old. She had effectively ruled China for 20 years while her husband declined. Now she faced a choice. Her son, Li Xian, became Emperor Zhongzong. Tradition dictated that Wu Zhao should retire to a comfortable palace, enjoy her grandchildren, and allow her son to rule. She would retain the title of Empress Dowager and considerable influence, but the actual power would pass to the new generation. Wu Zhao had different plans. Within weeks of her son taking the throne, she began undermining him. She countermanded his decisions. She publicly criticized his appointments. She made it clear to the court that she, not her son, was still in charge. Emperor Zhongzong tried to resist. He appointed his wife's father to a senior government position without consulting his mother. This was a minor assertion of independence, the kind of decision any emperor should be able to make. Wu Zhao used it as justification for a coup. In 684, after her son had been emperor for only 54 days, Wu Zhao summoned him to a meeting. When he arrived, he found himself surrounded by guards loyal to his mother. He was informed that he was being removed from the throne for incompetence. His younger brother, Li Dan, was installed as Emperor Ruizong. But everyone understood that Ruizong was a puppet. He was not even permitted to live in the imperial palace. He was housed in a separate compound, brought out for ceremonies, and kept entirely away from actual governance. Wu Zhao ruled openly now. She did not pretend to be advising her son. She made decisions in her own name, using her own seal. She was Empress Dowager officially, and Emperor in reality. But even this was not enough. To secure her position, she created the most terrifying institution in Chinese history, the secret police. The organization was called the Lai Junchen Bureau, named after its most notorious director. Its purpose was simple: identify, arrest, and eliminate anyone who might threaten Wu Zhao's power. Lai Junchen was a former minor official who had risen through Wu Zhao's ranks by demonstrating a talent for extracting confessions. He believed that torture, properly applied, could make anyone confess to anything. He wrote a manual on interrogation techniques that became infamous throughout China. The manual was titled The Classic of Entrapment. It detailed methods for psychological manipulation, physical torture, and the construction of false evidence. Lai Junshin trained hundreds of interrogators using this manual. They spread throughout the empire, looking for traitors. Anyone could be accused. Ministers, generals, merchants, monks. An anonymous letter was enough to trigger an investigation. A careless word overheard by a servant was enough. The accused were brought to special prisons where Lai Junshin's methods were applied. The torture was designed not to determine guilt, but to produce confessions. Names of co-conspirators were demanded. Each name became a new investigation. The network of accusations expanded exponentially. Historians estimate that during Wu Zhao's reign, over 2,000 officials were executed or forced to commit suicide. Tens of thousands more were exiled, imprisoned, or demoted. Entire families were destroyed because one member was accused. The terror was effective. No one dared oppose Wu Zhao. No one dared even whisper criticism. The surveillance was so complete that people stopped speaking freely, even in their own homes. In 690, Wu Zhao took the final step. She abolished the Tang dynasty that her lovers and sons had ruled. She declared a new dynasty, the Zhou dynasty, with herself as emperor. Not empress, emperor. She adopted the male title, the male rituals, the male prerogatives. She was 66 years old. No woman in Chinese history had ever done what she was doing. The concept of a female ruler was considered a violation of natural order, a cosmic impossibility. Wu Zhao rewrote the rules. She commissioned scholars to find precedents for female rule in ancient texts. When they could not find any, she had them create new interpretations. Buddhist texts were revised to include prophecies about a female ruler who would bring salvation. Confucian texts were reinterpreted to allow for exceptional women who transcended gender. She created new characters for the Chinese written language. One of them was a new character for her own name, a combination of the characters for sky and light. She was no longer Wu Zhao. She was Wu Zetian. Zetian meant ruling in accordance with heaven. The ministers who had survived the purges bowed to the inevitable. They addressed her as emperor. They performed the rituals appropriate for a male ruler. They pretended that nothing unusual was happening. Wu Zetian ruled as emperor for 15 years. She was effective. She expanded the civil service examination system, allowing talented commoners to rise to positions of power. She promoted capable generals who won victories on the frontier. She maintained the prosperity that the Tang dynasty had built. She also continued to kill. Wu Zetian's reign produced a body count within her own family that staggers comprehension. Her sister died under mysterious circumstances shortly after Wu Zetian rose to power. The official record attributes the death to illness. Modern historians suspect poison. Her niece, the daughter of her sister, was killed on Wu Zetian's orders in 670. The niece's crime was being too beautiful. Wu Zetian feared that Emperor Gaozong might become attracted to her. The niece was strangled. Her son, Li Hong, the crown prince, died suddenly in 675 at age 23. The official cause was illness. Contemporary rumors attributed his death to his mother. Li Hong had committed the unforgivable sin of showing compassion to Empress Wang and Consort Xiao's surviving relatives. He had requested that the daughters of the dead women be released from slavery and allowed to marry. Wu Zetian interpreted this as sympathy for her enemies. Li Hong died within months of making the request. Another son, Li Xian, was named crown prince after Li Hong's death. He proved too independent. He conducted his own investigation into his brother's death and began asking dangerous questions. In 680, Wu Zetian, accused him of plotting rebellion. He was exiled. 4 years later, he was forced to commit suicide. Her third son became Emperor Zhongzong. He was deposed after 54 days, as I mentioned earlier. He spent the next 15 years under house arrest, never knowing if his mother would decide to kill him too. Her fourth son became the puppet Emperor Ruizong. He was so terrified of his mother that he refused to make any decision at all. He spent his reign hiding in his compound, hoping to be overlooked. Her grandchildren fared no better. Her granddaughter, Princess Yongtai, was beaten to death at age 17 on Wu Zetian's orders in 701. The princess's crime was gossiping about Wu Zetian's male favorites. Her husband, Wu Zetian's grandson-in-law, was executed alongside her. The message was clear. No family connection protected anyone. Blood meant nothing. Only absolute loyalty to Wu Zetian mattered, and even that was not always enough. In her 70s, Wu Zetian began taking male consorts. This was unprecedented. Emperors had always maintained harems of women. The concept of a female ruler with a harem of men was so outside Chinese cultural norms that many historians initially refused to believe the records. But the records are explicit. Her first known favorite was Shui Huayi, a former street vendor who caught her attention through a palace contact. She made him a Buddhist monk, which gave him an excuse to enter the inner palace freely. She made him abbot of a major temple, which gave him wealth and status. She made him a general, which gave him an army. Shui Huayi became arrogant. He assumed his relationship with the emperor protected him from consequences. He picked fights with other officials. He burned down a temple when he became angry about losing favor. In 694, Wu Zetian had him killed. His body was cremated within hours. His family received no notification. Her next favorites were two brothers named Zhang Yizi and Zhang Changzong. They were young, beautiful, and considerably more discreet than Shui Huayi. They served Wu Zetian throughout her 70s, managing her personal affairs, screening her visitors, and according to persistent rumors, performing services that went beyond administrative assistance. The Zhang brothers accumulated enormous power. Officials who wanted access to the emperor had to go through them first. Bribes flowed into their hands. Their relatives received prestigious appointments. The brothers became greedy. They began acting as if they would rule after Wu Zetian died. They made enemies of the crown prince and other potential successors. They assumed their position was secure. It was not. By 705, Wu Zetian was 80 years old and declining rapidly. She was frequently bedridden. She could no longer attend court. The Zhang brothers controlled access to her, which meant they effectively controlled the government. The officials who had survived 30 years of terror saw an opportunity. A coup was organized by a coalition of ministers, generals, and members of the imperial family. The plan was simple: storm the palace, kill the Zhang brothers, force Wu Zetian to abdicate, restore the Tang dynasty. On the 20th day of the first month of 705, the conspirators struck. Armed soldiers entered the palace compound. They found the Zhang brothers in their quarters and killed them immediately. Their bodies were dragged to the public square and dismembered. The conspirators then proceeded to Wu Zetian's chambers. She was found in bed, too weak to resist. She was informed that her favorites were dead and that her son, the former Emperor Zhongzong, was being restored to the throne. Wu Zetian asked if the Zhang brothers had really been killed. They confirmed that they had. She said nothing else. Emperor Zhongzong was brought from the house arrest where he had spent the last 20 years. He was installed as emperor for the second time. The Zhou dynasty that Wu Zetian had created was abolished. The Tang dynasty was restored. Wu Zetian was moved to a separate palace. She was stripped of the title of emperor. She was given the title of Empress Dowager, which was appropriate for a former emperor's widow. She spent the remaining months of her life in seclusion. She died on the 16th day of the 11th month of 705. She was 81 years old. Wu Zetian was buried alongside Emperor Gaozong in the Qianling Mausoleum, one of the most elaborate tomb complexes in Chinese history. The tomb has never been excavated. It is believed to contain treasures beyond calculation. Outside the tomb stand two monuments. One is covered with inscriptions praising Emperor Gaozong's accomplishments. The other is blank. The blank monument is Wu Zetian's. Why is it blank? No one knows for certain. Some historians believe Wu Zetian ordered it left blank because she believed her accomplishments were beyond words. Others believe her successors left it blank because they did not know what to say about the woman who had ruled them for 50 years. The most likely explanation is that her successors could not agree on what to write. If they praised her, they would be celebrating a usurper who had overthrown their dynasty. If they condemned her, they would be insulting the woman who had given birth to the emperors now ruling. They chose silence. The blank monument has stood for over 1,300 years. It remains blank today. The descendants of Empress Wang and Consort Xiao, the two women who were turned into human pigs, were not forgotten. After Wu Zetian's death, Emperor Zhongzong issued a decree rehabilitating the two women. They were posthumously restored to their titles. Their surviving relatives were released from slavery and allowed to return to normal life. Monuments were erected in their honor. But the rehabilitation could not restore what had been taken. Both families had been systematically destroyed during Wu Zetian's reign. Their properties had been confiscated. Their male members had been executed or exiled. Their female members had been enslaved in palace laundries or forced to become servants. By the time of their rehabilitation, almost no one was left to rehabilitate. The families had been erased. Wu Zetian's revenge had been complete. Chinese historians have wrestled with Wu Zetian for 13 centuries. The traditional verdict was condemnation. She was depicted as a monster, a usurper, an aberration of nature. The stories of her crimes were repeated and elaborated. She became the archetype of the evil empress, the warning tale about what happens when women are allowed to hold power. Modern historians have attempted to revise this verdict. They point to her genuine accomplishments, the expansion of the examination system, the promotion of talented commoners, the military victories, the administrative reforms. They argue that much of her negative reputation was propaganda created by men who could not accept female rule. Both verdicts are probably correct simultaneously. Wu Zetian was genuinely capable. She maintained a prosperous empire for 50 years. She promoted meritocracy over aristocracy. She was more effective than many of the male emperors who came before and after her. She was also genuinely monstrous. She killed her own children. She created a police state that terrorized millions. She invented a method of execution so cruel that it has been remembered for over 1,000 years. She was both of these things at once. The greatest female ruler in Chinese history, and one of the cruelest tyrants of any gender. Perhaps that combination was necessary. Perhaps a woman in 7th century China could not have achieved what Wu Zetian achieved without becoming what she became. Perhaps the system that excluded women from power could only be conquered by someone willing to commit any crime, sacrifice any principle, destroy any life that stood in her way. Or perhaps she was simply born without the capacity for mercy, and the power she achieved merely revealed what had always been inside her. In the winter of 655, 2 women were transformed into human pigs in a wine cellar beneath the imperial palace. Their hands and feet were severed. Their bodies were stuffed into wine jars. They were left to die over days, while the woman who ordered their torture visited to watch their suffering. That woman was Wu Zetian. She was 27 years old. She had risen from timber merchant's daughter to lowest rank concubine, to disgraced nun to Empress of China. She had allegedly killed her own infant daughter to frame a rival. She had manipulated her husband into destroying anyone who opposed her. She was just getting started. Over the next 50 years, she would kill her own sister, her own niece, her own sons, her own grandson, her own granddaughter. She would create a secret police force that murdered thousands. She would become the only female emperor in 4,000 years of Chinese history. She would rule until she was 81 years old. And through it all, she never escaped the curse that Consort Xiao pronounced while dying in that wine jar. She banned cats from the palace for 50 years. She moved the capital 500 miles to escape the ghosts. She took sleeping medicines that never helped. She was haunted until the day she died by the women she had turned into human pigs. The blank tombstone outside her grave is the only monument she received. Her successors could not find words to describe what she had been. They left the stone empty, a permanent acknowledgement that some lives cannot be summarized, some legacies cannot be judged, some horrors cannot be expressed in any language. Wu Zetian ruled China longer than any woman in history. She killed more people than most emperors of any gender. She proved that a woman could hold absolute power. If you found this story valuable, subscribe and hit the notification bell. Share with anyone who thinks they understand what ruthlessness means. Comment below, telling me where in the world you are watching from. See you in the next video, where we will continue uncovering the buried truths that reveal what human beings become when nothing can stop them.